Game of Thrones showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss are back with a three-body problem for Netflix. While the series has not yet been released to the public, the early reviews from the outlets most disposed towards liking it are in, and they have a lot in common with the early reviews for the Rings of Power before it, in that they present as positive, but read as negative. Already, the industry trades are running cover for Benioff and Weiss, calling the three-body problem unadaptable, which doesn't change that by all outwardly appearances they blew it again. And as we shall see, it was entirely predictable that they would. This video is sponsored by Surfshark. The early reviews may present as positive, but most of them read as negative, and if history is anything to go by, that is likely what the audience reaction and consensus will be as well, negative. Benioff and Weiss dropping the ball on this was entirely predictable, and they should never have been hired for it in the first place. But why not? How can we on the outside see that, when Hollywood can't? Let's find out, as we go through what the three-body problem is, what the pre-release reviews say, and the excuse Hollywood is preemptively running with this time. But first, whenever you're online, you leave a digital footprint, and whenever you sign up for some site, you leave your data, which could be trafficked to third parties. Indeed, if you receive a ton of spam emails, as most do, that's why. To protect yourself, you need to protect your data, and a good way of doing that is through a VPN, such as the one delivered by this channel's sponsor, Surfshark. A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a privacy protection tool which encrypts your online data and secures your personal information, even when you're on a free public Wi-Fi, which is a goldmine for anyone wanting your data. Surfshark masks your IP address so that your location, download history and other data isn't linked to your personal ID, while their clean web feature blocks trackers, malware and phishing attempts, enabling you to surf safely. Best of all, unlike some other VPN providers out there, Surfshark does not monitor, track or store what you do online. There's no activity log. In addition to providing online safety, Surfshark also liberates your internet by unblocking blocked websites and enabling you to bypass geo-blocking restrictions by changing the country you access the internet from, which gives some great advantages when it comes to streaming. For instance, you can access 15 different Netflix libraries, all with a different selection of movies and TV series, simply by changing your virtual location. And there are many to choose from, as Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in more than 100 countries around the world. That's pretty good, but it gets even better. If you type in the code MIDNIGHT when ordering, that triggers an exclusive special offer of 3 extra months for free. So, secure your privacy with Surfshark. Just head on over to surfshark.deals/midnight to order, link is in the description. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and with that, let's get back to the three-body problem. The Three-Body Problem is the name of the first book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Chinese engineer turned author Liu Cixin. But just like George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, the whole saga will come to be known under the title of the first book in it, in that case Game of Thrones, in this case The Three-Body Problem. The series portrays a fictional past, present and future, wherein Earth encounters an alien civilization from a nearby system of 3 sun-like stars orbiting one another, in an example of the three-body problem in orbital mechanics. Now you might want to interject, but how can you say they failed already? It's fresh, with a 71% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. True, but as we've covered in detail before, such fresh pre-release scores on Rotten Tomatoes cannot be trusted, because they can so easily be rigged, and for major releases, more often than not, they are. A positive review from a minor outlet can be bought for as little as $50, and the big ones, when a lot of money is at stake, will play ball with the studio by writing a review that in every way is negative, but they'll put a positive spin on it and mark it as a positive on Rotten Tomatoes. See, that's what you gotta be on the lookout for in pre-release reviews. If the reviews listed as positive, in reality read as negative. The perfect illustration of this is Amazon's The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. With The Rings of Power, virtually the entire entertainment media complex walked in lockstep, defending it as the best thing since sliced bread. All of them praising the visual effects, and very little else, because if you read the early reviews more carefully, you'd find that what at first glance looked like glowingly positive reviews, in reality quite often was negative, filled with hedges, expressing hope that the story and characters would get better as the series progressed. My go-to example here is The Guardian, where the pre-release review, so before any actual audiences had the chance to see the series for themselves, was so astoundingly positive that it even called out House of the Dragon as looking like amateur hour by comparison. And with a headline like that, what's the point in reading any further? But if you did, you'd find that this positive review was filled with hedges, which was needed to set up the real review, which was posted after the series was done, and thus after their obligation to Amazon had been met. And there, the title really did say it all. Now it's over. Let's come out and say it. The Rings of Power was a stinker. I bring that up because it's through the lens of you can't trust these pre-release reviews, where screeners were only sent to friendly media, that the pre-release reviews of The Three-Body Problem must be read. So, what then do these reviews say? Being good chills, Collider maintained Game of Thrones creators successfully adapt your next favorite sci-fi binge, saying, "The first thing you'll note from this review is that this is not just an adaptation of The Three-Body Problem. Wisely, the showrunners have decided to mix aspects of all three of Liu Cixin's books, bringing in more interesting characters from later novels into the present to give a more well-rounded approach to the story with an ensemble cast." So, if you're going into this series having only read the first book, expect a bit of confusion. That's gonna be a theme. IGN praises it in their positive review, but also points out how confusing it is, and not just the metaphysical aspects, saying, "There's a lot going on here, but the creators did not wimp out. I can't even tell you who the main character is. This show is too big for a main character." Remember what I said about hedges and expressing hope that this or that would get better? Well, in their positive review, Business Insider wrote, "If this were a spaceship, Netflix has succeeded in getting it into orbit. Now, all that remains is to see how it will hopefully be able to stick the re-entry." Meanwhile, industry trade The Hollywood Reporter says it is more serviceable than dazzling, which is enough to make it count as a positive on Rotten Tomatoes. But that's faint praise if I ever saw it. The Wrap calls it lukewarm, which is still a positive review, while in a rare moment of honesty, one of the most corporate, TDS-afflicted and pro-establishment outlets of our time, namely Rolling Stone magazine, calls it a big miss, saying that Benioff and Weiss failed to crack the code. That right there, I think, is the key issue, and Variety inadvertently touched on it as well in their positive review titled, "Netflix Three-Body Problem cements Game of Thrones creators as masters of adapting the unadaptable." Unadaptable. That is another recurring theme in all of these reviews, but Variety demonstrates that they use the term only as an excuse, writing, "Before a rushed ending soured the Game of Thrones fanbase on showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the duo had rightfully earned acclaim for wrangling a seemingly unadaptable series of books into a damn good adaptation." Well, There is a lot to unpack in that quote right there, and it goes to the heart of why Benioff and Weiss should never have been hired to do the three-body problem in the first place. Let's dive in. In Hollywood, there is this myth that people like to tell themselves, namely that this or that is unadaptable, unfilmable, or some variation thereof. You know what that really means? It means the one saying it can't imagine how to do it, or that they're making excuses for someone who tried and failed. In those circumstances, they'll invoke some borderline supernatural external force to excuse their own failure. That's when something is unadaptable, or a production is cursed, or something like that. You see, it's so much better to hide behind something esoteric as that, than to admit that they blew it, which is always and without exception the real issue at hand. Proving that point, every once in a while, something up till then considered unadaptable, like The Lord of the Rings, or more recently One Piece, is adapted, and it's a smashing success, embraced by the masses and the pickiest of fans alike, thus proving it could be done, and that it was never unadaptable in the first place, because nothing is ever truly unadaptable. You just need to have the necessary screen time at your disposal. The properties on which this term is employed tend to have source material, typically but not exclusively books, which are rather verbose and that deal in many abstract quantities that will keep a reader engaged, like the plans within plans of Dune, but that don't easily translate to a visual medium, especially not when it's restricted to a 2-hour runtime. So really, when someone says something is unadaptable, the implicit part is that it is adaptable, just not in 2 hours worth of screen time. That is why The Lord of the Rings was considered unadaptable for so many years. No one was able to come up with a script that convincingly condensed the story to 2 hours. Then Peter Jackson came along and successfully adapted the unadaptable, but he needed like 9 hours worth of screen time to do it. Conversely, David Lynch's Dune was a massive flop upon release in 1984, mostly because the 2-hour running time of the theatrical cut made it incomprehensible to the viewers at the time that hadn't read the book, thus furthering the impression that Dune was unadaptable. But then the year 2000 came along and the miniseries actually did it in 5 hours and change worth of running time, which is incidentally about the same running time as parts 1 and 2 of Denis Villeneuve's Dune combined, and they all covered the same ground that the Lynch movie tried and failed to do in 2 hours. And on that note, yes, Denis Villeneuve's Dune is a landmark cinematic achievement and all of that. And the 2000 miniseries looks like a film stage play with special effects taken from a PlayStation 1 cutscene. But honestly, if you want a faithful recounting of the story from the book, without actually reading the book, you're better off with a miniseries. But anyway, back to the point here. The excuse that something is unadaptable goes away when the available number of hours worth of screen time goes up. Implication being, since the three-body problem is a series and not a movie, it has no excuse. The running time is not an issue, and so competent showrunners and writers worth their salt, and who also understands the differences in culture and expression between a Chinese written work and a Western written work, and who knows how to account for these on screen when adapting a Chinese written work for Western audiences, should have no trouble making the three-body problem a smash hit. Sadly, they didn't get any competent writers and showrunners. They got Benioff and Weiss, who have proven themselves to be anything but.
Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
Let's now revisit that quote of Variety running cover for them, before a rushed ending soured the Game of Thrones fan base on showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. The duo had rightfully earned acclaim for wrangling a seemingly unadaptable series of books into a damn good adaptation. That is Variety blatantly lying right there. You see, the thing with Game of Thrones is that the first few books are so linear and straightforward that an idiot could straight up copy and paste the books into scripts, and then just mold where each episode begins and ends. In fact, the idiot who wrote X-Men Origins Wolverine brought his idiot friend, and they did just that, and they were hailed as geniuses for it. The first few books were never considered unadaptable. That term wasn't thrown around until the later books, when they got more complex as George R.R. Martin started losing track of his own story. That's when the showrunners could no longer rely on copying and pasting, but would have to put more effort into choosing which storylines to adapt and how to adapt them. And while more casual fans wouldn't know anything was amiss for a long time yet, book readers knew as early as season 4 and 5 that Benioff and Weiss had dropped the ball. Never mind running out of books from season 7. As soon as the books they had got complex, they couldn't hack it anymore. Now, getting back to the three-body problem. The problem here is that unlike Game of Thrones, which takes a few books before things start getting complex, the three-body problem does that right away. Being Chinese books, the English translations even need a ton of extra material, explaining to Western readers the many cultural quirks that Chinese readers just take for granted. Based on their Game of Thrones track record, Benioff and Weiss were never going to manage the three-body problem, and it should never have been given to them. With them, you can't even blame DEI, as they're the result of good old-fashioned nepotism, which is another way the most skilled and best suited for the job doesn't get it, because someone else has immutable characteristics which politically make them a more desirable hire. And in this case, those immutable characteristics would be Benioff's dad in banking and film and TV series funding. Now, I'm not saying conclusively that that's how they got this job, but ever since Wolverine, that's been a door opener. So, how excited are you for the three-body problem? Let me know in the comments. And before you go, remember to secure your privacy and bypass quarrelsome geo-blocking restrictions with Surfshark VPN. Type in our code MIDNIGHT at surfshark.deals/midnight to get an exclusive deal of 3 extra months for free. Link is in the description.